This model from Conrad has a big Palfinger loading crane mounted on an MAN TGS chassis painted in Wiesbauer colours. Wiesbauer is a German craneage and haulage company. The packaging is a standard Conrad box with the model contained within a foam rubber wrapping. In terms of information, there's nothing about the real machine, and there's nothing to cover the model either. There is a small bag of parts that come with it which have to be fitted to the model, and for the most part this is straightforward. The first thing to do is to separate some of the plastic parts, and that's best done with a sharp modelling knife. And with that done, the fitting of the parts can commence. The roof aerial is a simple part that just plugs into a hole in the top of the cab, and on this model that was a good fit and went straight in. The same is also true of the door mirrors, and they just press into place. With one mirror you have to fit an extra piece onto it, and that's best done before you fit the mirror onto the cab. But when you've done that, you can just press it into place and the mirrors are complete. Moving on to the big Palfinger, it has a working winch, and the first thing to do with that is to free the hook. That's taped to the cable drum in the way that Conrad liked to do. So the thing to do is just to pull off the tape and unwind the drum a bit, and the pulley for the winch line just clips onto the end of the boom. There is a pair of guide pulleys on the boom, and there's no instructions telling you whether the winch line goes below or above those pulleys. I'll put it above the pulleys because I think that's probably the right place for them, and you can just push those into place when that's hooked over, and if you wind it up a bit, the winch line now runs to the boom end. There is one more piece to fit onto the boom, and that's what seems to be a rope guide, and that just presses in onto a section near the end. Again, there are no instructions, so it's not clear whether the rope should go on the inside of the rope guide or actually rest on the outside. So we'll run it on the outside for now. And that completes the assembly of the model, and with that done we can fold the boom up and return it back to the transport configuration. Looking at the detail, we'll begin underneath, and the chassis is pretty good. You can see that the rear suspension is plastic, but reasonably well detailed, and at the front the two steering axles are modelled for functionality rather than detail. The MAN cab looks particularly good, largely due to the Wiesbauer paint scheme, good detail, colour-coded mirrors, and at the bottom there are a pair of stabilisers which are all plastic, which looks okay, but perhaps the colour match is just very slightly off. The exhaust pipe is metal and looks good, and there's some very good graphic printing on the side of the cab with the Wiesbauer logo and phone numbers, and the wheels look particularly sharp with the painted red hubs. At the rear, the metal load box is also very well decorated and looks great, and below that there are wheel chocks, a towing hitch and a beacon light. But given this is modelled after a real truck, it would have been good to have seen a number plate. The Palfinger boom looks great with the yellow sections modelled in metal, but there's no hydraulic hosing detailed. At the base of the boom, the main lift cylinder looks good, and is a fairly simple representation of the equipment boxes and slew motors. The Palfinger graphics on the boom look good, and if we move up to the telescopic sections, the pistons and the cylinder jackets are modelled for each telescopic piece, and that continues right the way to the top, and incidentally the chains on the hook are not included with the model. So let's test the truck's features, and the first thing we'll do is give it a push on the test track, and it rolls in a straight line smoothly, no problem at all. Picking the truck up, there's no modelled suspension, but there is play in each of the two rear axles, but nothing on the front two. And turning it upside down, the front pair of axles have link steering, but you can see that the range of movement is pretty restricted. And there's also steering on the rear axle, and again, fairly small range of movement. If we set the wheels to the maximum they'll go, the model won't push because the tyres are fouling. So pushing is really limited to straight lines. As you would expect, the cab of the MAN tips forward. It can't tip forward too far, but at least it does stay in a tipped position, and under the cab is a reasonably detailed engine, so it's implemented reasonably well. Another feature is that the load box is removable, and underneath is a fifth wheel which is set far forward and quite low, so you might have trouble finding a trailer that fits. Onward with the crane functions, and we'll start with the rear outriggers. These are two-stage beams, with the larger section being plastic and the smaller section being metal. And these look fine, but you can see that when they're fully pulled out, these beams stretch out quite a long way, and the result of that is that because the innermost beams are plastic, they're really not quite rigid enough. To lower the pads at the front, it's just the same as, in fact, all the stabilisers on the model. They just unscrew and then you can lower the pads. The pistons are in fact just screw threads, so it's not the most realistic modelling, but it is functional and it works. The last set of stabilisers are part of the crane itself, and these just pull out, and just like on the real machine, you then rotate the legs down and round, and when you do that they just clip into place, and then you can lower the pads. Once all the stabilisers are out, you can have a go at working the crane, and first thing to do is just to unfold it, and you can kind of see, I think, that the cylinders and the mechanism is really quite stiff, so there's no danger of it not holding any pose. And before pulling out any of the telescopic sections, it's wise to unwind some of the winch rope, and then you can begin to pull out the telescopic sections. The pieces just slide together, there's no locking pins or anything like that on the telescopic sections, and there's enough friction between the sections that they won't fold up under their own weight when they're posed pointing up, but neither would they hold much load either, so you couldn't realistically hang much from the hook when the telescopic section is at its maximum extension. However, it is an impressive model because with the boom fully extended and pointing up, it reaches to a height of about 48 centimetres, that's about 18 inches, and it looks impressive. The other alternative you have is with the hook, because if you don't want the hook attached to the winch, there is also a fixed hook supplied, and both it or the winch hook can be fitted to one of two boom positions, which is welcome flexibility. Overall, this is a typically robust Conrad model. It's got good detail and functionality, and it looks particularly good in the Wiesbauer livery, and for those reasons it's highly recommended.